The final stand. Night. The cold, late November wind slipped by the knight's figure in the dark. His blade was drawn and his faceplate down. He could see the enemies approaching, their torches illuminating the desolate plains, with chants and banter breaking the eerie silence. In the dark alone, he smiled to himself. Not one of those smiles of joy or glee, but a painfully sad one as he realized that the enemies were people too. He counted at least 30 Noprian soldiers. 30 people. People families go back to. He wondered if he would ever see his family again. The odds weren't exactly in his favor. He thought of Haldir and everything that they had done to get to where he was that night. "This is for you, Haldir," he whispered to himself. He gripped the hilt, readied his blade, and prepared to fight. "Down with the Eurelians!" exclaimed one soldier. "Send their elven skickjaws back to Silurius!" exclaimed another. The soldiers marched in two parallel rows, with one captain leading the front. They were only a few hundred meters in front of the knight. The anxiety was starting to set in. His previously steady rhythm of breathing had become rapidly ragged, amplified by his metal helmet. He could hear the plates of his armor slightly clattering as he shook. His body grew cold as sweat met the chilling air. He remained still, however, knowing that the only way out of this situation was through. The Noprians were only 50 meters away from the knight. He had to fight off the urge not to make a run for it. He let out a deep breath and began to walk towards them. As he drew closer, he began to produce a high-pitched whistle, one that Haldir had taught him many years ago. The approaching soldiers stopped in their tracks, confused by the unusual sound. The knight continued his advance until he was barely in the viewing distance of the enemy. "Captain!" Soldiers let out shrieks of terror as a man clad in black armor emerged from the darkness, sword clasp in hand, accompanied by an eerie whistle. The captain leading the group instinctively reached for his sword, drawing his blade as well. "State your business here," the captain shouted, trying to hide the fear in his voice. The mysterious man stood unmoving and silent, simply staring at them as if he had not heard a word. The captain could hear a low murmur of voices emanating from the rest of the soldiers standing around him. "It's the Akiro," said one soldier. A terrified whisper spread through the group. The Akiro was a horrific creature from Noprian folklore, a creature said to hunt any of those who tread the night unwaringly. The wind, which had previously been blowing at a steady rate, suddenly died down, leaving the plains in complete silence. Soldiers began to grip their weapons. Torch-bearers raised their flames to illuminate as much of the surrounding area as possible. The captain began slowly ordering his troops into an attack formation using hand gestures and sounds. The tension was mounting in the air, until the knight finally spoke. "My name is Vesrin of Nilfnays, more commonly referred to as the Knight of Eureli. I am commander of the Eurelian Royal Legions, and I will ask you only one thing. Leave this place," the knight triumphantly announced. To the Noprians, this was scarier than the thought of the Akiro. The Knight of Eureli was synonymous for his victories across the known world, a living legend said to be undefeatable, with powers given to him by the All-Seer. The soldiers were now in a crescent formation, stemming from the captain out in each direction. "We will have to decline. We have you outnumbered 30-1, shouted the captain. "Soldiers, advance!" Each soldier in the formation began to advance slowly, weapons drawn and ready to fight. They all knew the tales of the unkillable knight, but they knew their only chance at victory was to work together. Night. He stood his ground as the Noprian soldiers advanced on his position. In his mind, he was picking out the soldiers that appeared the weakest. One man approached him first, arcing his blade in a reckless swing that the knight deflected using the flat side of his sword. followed by a successive strike of his own. The man crumbled to the ground lifeless. He had yet to move from the point where he had been standing before 3 more soldiers began to push forward. One bore a spear and shield, while the others wielded only simple swords. They all moved together in a pack, forcing the knight to take them all on at once. The 2 swordsmen swung at him simultaneously. He parried one incoming blow while moving out of the way of the other, barely dodging the full attack, but his shoulder was still grazed by the blade. He winced as the wound got exposed to the open air. The slight aching threw off his next swing. The pain almost distracted him from the incoming jab from the spear-bearer, but he reacted quick enough to avoid being hit. Making a split-second decision, he took hold of the spear's shaft, catching the spear-bearer off guard and yanking it out of his grasp. The knight dropped to his knees while spinning, knocking the 2 swordsmen off of their feet with the spear of the shaft. The knight quickly tried to get back up on his feet, but as soon as he rose, his vision was met with the incoming shield of the now spearless spear-bearer, knocking him to the ground dazed. His ears rung with a high-pitched noise as he heard the footsteps of the rest of the soldiers surrounding him. Through his blurred vision, he could make out the figure of someone standing over him. Captain. The captain stood over the body of the Aurelian knight, a wide grin on his face. How unfortunate will it be when the Aurelians learn of the death of their hero? The captain exclaimed. The surrounding soldiers let out hurrahs of approval. The captain reached for the faceplate of the knight's helmet and ripped it off, revealing Vesseron's face to the soldiers. You scum, muttered Vesseron. It would be better to spare me. When the Allseer learns of my fate, you'll live in eternal danger, he warned. The soldiers stayed silent for a few seconds. The threat of the Allseer was all too real. The captain began to raise his sword. Yeah, I can live with that, the captain said while swinging his sword, cleanly slashing the fallen knight's neck. The captain looked around at his troops. We will be seen as heroes when we return to Nopria. The soldiers raised their weapons in the traditional Noprian salute. After the soldiers were done celebrating their victory, they formed up into their marching formation and continued their trek through the plains, leaving the dying knight alone in the dark. I'm so sorry. Haldir, Vesseron muttered quietly to himself. The end.